welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. In today's show, I'm going to share about one of my go-to timing techniques, which is secondary progressions. This is a predictive tool that I use all the time. I use it in client consults, I'm sharing about it with students, and I use it in my own life too, with friends and family as well. So what I'm going to do here is take you through a public example chart, looking at a time of endings and striking out in a new direction. And we'll be looking at the chart of Prince Harry in regards to January of 2020, when he and his wife, Meghan Markle, ended up breaking away from the royal family. Before we dive into that, I wanted to let you know that I have a new live cohort of students going through my Predicting with Progressions course. If you would like to learn this technique of secondary progressions so that you too can use it for predictive uses in your own life, I hope you can join us. We have some live Q&As happening this June, so you can find out more or register over at kellysastrology.com. We'll also share the direct link in the show notes below as well. All right, so let's get back to Prince Harry and 2020. So some of you might remember this story. It was kind of a big news event in early 2020, right before we went into the COVID pandemic. It was in early January 2020 that Harry and Meghan announced that they wanted to step down as full-time working royals. And then there were a lot of negotiations that went on within the royal family about the roles that Meghan and Harry would play or not within the royal family. And, from Meghan and Harry's announcement, that was in January, and there was a lot of discussions, and it probably took a few months before sort of some clarity about how they would go forward came to be. Now, you may remember that story, you may not, that's okay. The reason I wanted to use a public example chart is that you can track the story against the astrology, which will be interesting for some of you to do. But mostly my intention is to illustrate what it can look like when an individual might go through a major shift in their lives. This is the kind of thing that clients want to know about. It's the kind of thing that students are always curious about. And of course, I know it's helped me to have this timing awareness when I've been navigating change in my own life as well. So as we go through this example, whether you're interested in the exact example, of Prince Harry or not, just try and focus on the astrology of what was happening so that you will then know in the future some of the different astrology triggers to look for or to watch for, whether that's in your own chart or the charts of your own clients or friends and family. So as we move through this example, you will get some insight into how secondary progressions work. But of course, my intention today is just to really show you astrology in action. I'm also going to show you how I kind of layer or weave secondary progressions and transits together. What I'll be doing is fairly intermediate level astrology, so it's definitely not in the beginner zone. So just be aware of that depending on your level of astrology. Some of it might be really clear, some of it might be fascinating, but totally new and different for you. I hope you find it interesting just to see some of the things that we can do with astrology. And of course, if you are intrigued by these techniques and you want to learn more, I'd encourage you to check out my online astrology course on progressions over at kellysastrology.com. Now, as we're getting started, I realized I should give you a quick introduction to secondary progressions. So this is a symbolic timing tool that moves the chart forward using this ratio or range of 1 day for each year of life. So a really simple conceptual way to understand this is just think about your age. So think about whatever number your age is. Let's pretend that you're 41 years old. And so in secondary progressions, we would look to the planet's placements when you were 41 days old to give us meaning for your life now at 41 years old. So if you're 27 or 63, we would look at the planets when you were 27 days old or 63 days old, and they would have meaning for the corresponding year of life. Now, I know that sounds totally wild and totally wacky, and like, how can this even make sense or have any value? But I promise you, after more than 20 years in practice, this is a really astounding technique in terms of the insight and the descriptions of the timing, the quality of energy you might be experiencing, the topics and themes that may be coming together for you. And so, even though it sounds weird, it's definitely a technique that is worth your time and attention. So there are actually four different predictive things going on that I think are of note in early 2020 in Harry's chart that I want to mention. There are two important secondary progressions, which is where we'll start. And there are also two transits that are the kinds of things people would definitely notice. And the way that you'll see me weave some of the interpretation into the transits will draw on the quality of energy that is coming forward from the secondary progressions. So we'll start with the progressions, but you'll see a little bit of, how we can blend these things together. So first off, progressions. One of the favorite things that I like to look at when I'm doing a timing session for a client is to take a quick look at something called the progressed moon phase. So we all have a moon phase that we're born under in our birth chart, which has some indications for our life as a whole. And then over the course of a 30-year cycle or timeline, by progression, we are moving into a variety of different moon phases that will influence us for a 3 to 4 year timeline. So as we're coming into early 2020, Harry is moving into what's called the progressed balsamic moon phase. And this doesn't have anything to do with salad dressing, but it is perhaps more commonly or widely known as the dark moon phase. So the balsamic or dark moon phase is the last of the 8 moon phases. And this is a period of time, it can last anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And when the moon is progressing through her balsamic or dark phase, she's very much in retreat. She is moving towards a place of darkness. So symbolically, she is stepping back from being visible or active. And when each of us goes through our own progressed balsamic or dark moon phase, we are in a season in our life associated with endings, with closure and completion. It is like deep winter energy where you are wanting to pull back, rest, hibernate, retreat. Typically, it's a time where your physical energy is lower as well. So when I'm working with clients in the progressed balsamic moon phase, they typically can feel more worn out or tired, like their capacity is reduced. They might be run down. They might be dealing with some physical challenges or physical health concerns. Maybe there are things that they can normally manage in their body that are not being managed as well because that vital energy, as indicated by the moon, has kind of vanished for a short period of time. It's almost like your spirit is really spent and you need more of a break or a slower pace. Your motivation is less. So that idea of like craving retreat or hermit time is really common when we go through this progressed balsamic moon phase. Now, everyone experiences this balsamic moon phase, whether it's a 3 to 4 year period, we all have that at some point over a 30-year timeline. So if you're listening to this and you're over 30, you've already had at least one progressed balsamic moon phase in your life. And of course, if you live to be 90 or more, which is, some of the average, especially in wealthier developed countries that have access to great healthcare, you will have 3 different balsamic moon phase periods in your life. So these are seasons of life that we will all go through. So it's important to know when you'll be going through your progressed balsamic moon phase so that you can give yourself a little bit of a break or a bit of permission to go slower, maybe lay low, get some more rest. And you'll also have an understanding that you'll likely be less productive and perhaps less motivated during this time. And so with Prince Harry moving into his balsamic moon phase as 2020 began, it's a clue straight away that as he's looking forward at his life from the start of 2020, he is wanting to pull back or retreat, and that would be a theme for, 3 to 4 years after then. So that's just giving us a foundation of our starting point. We know this is like a lower ebb. Somebody is not, hitting their high strides and their peak productivity when we're in this phase. So now we come to the major progression that I wanted to mention, which was the first thing that really caught my attention about this time frame for Harry. And that is a unique progressed aspect that not everyone will experience. And this is progressed Mars conjunct the ascendant. So Harry is a Capricorn rising chart, and he was born with Mars in Sagittarius in his 12th whole sign house. And so at some point, as he heads into his life, that progressed Mars moves through the rest of Sagittarius into Capricorn and up to the exact degree of his Capricorn ascendant. So for Harry, this progressed Mars conjunct natal ascendant progression was active from December of 2019 until about May of 2021. It's pretty common for an aspect from progressed Mars to last about 18 months or so. Now, this is kind of a complicated progression because Mars is a planet that can have some complex nuance around interpretation. Straight away, we have some complications to do with the quality of sect, if you like. Harry is a daytime chart with the sun in the whole sign ninth house in Virgo. And that puts Mars in a technical condition known as contrary to sect. And of course, because Mars is the malefic of, it's the malefic in traditional astrology, it's the contrary to sect malefic. And that's a planet that has a little bit more of a prickly edge or a bit of a potentially problematic quality to it. And so with progressed Mars on the ascendant, we've got some complications or some prickly energy coming up. One of the ways Mars is often talked about in modern astrology is to do with energy and drive and motivation. And that would certainly have been part of the mix for Harry or for anyone else having progressed Mars on their ascendant. There is like a fire that maybe is activated. There is this courageous quality or decisive quality, and also an urgency, this sort of, whether it's impatience or this sense of like, we've got to do it, it's now or never. And that's definitely part of the mix. Mars, of course, is also linked to battles and combat and competition, that kind of war fighting planet, and with tension and discord. So especially in traditional astrology, we have this understanding that Mars can be quite disruptive. And so we also have this awareness that Mars is associated with sharp cutting implements, like swords and knives. And so whenever Mars gets activated by timing, we also get this kind of cutting energy that comes forward into our lives. So this idea of cutting ties or severing ties or separating away from, a thing or a person or a partnership or a pathway. And so when we think about progressed Mars on his ascendant in this kind of almost 18-month window as a time where he's really cutting ties with the royal family. And the decision to kind of, stand back or go in a different direction was obviously early 2020, but there were other actions that Harry took, in the year and a bit following that really helped cement the distance from him and, his father and his brother, for instance. And so that idea of like wielding your sword and what cuts might that lead to can be part of this progressed Mars on the ascendant. So if you're experiencing a big progression from Mars to your natal chart, it's that idea of like, am I cutting myself away? Am I cutting myself free? Am I in a battle or this really sort of tense, standoff situation? What am I pushing for and what am I pushing towards? But we know we're going to have that sort of hot quality of whether it's anger or irritation or frustration is really flaring up when we have such an active Mars progression. Of course, Mars is about anger, and so feeling full of anger or that frustration, that heat would definitely be part of having progressed Mars on your ascendant. We know the ascendant is the most individual part of the chart, and so feeling both like a warrior, but also feeling very fired up or very angry, maybe very bold or just ready to push for what you want would be so congruent with this theme, this archetype. So for Harry, because he also has a Scorpio midheaven in his birth chart, so he's a Capricorn rising chart with Scorpio midheaven in the 11th whole sign house, that progressed Mars, well, I shouldn't say the progressed Mars, before we get to that, natal Mars in general, has a lot to do with career and life direction topics for him. And so with that progressed Mars coming to the ascendant, this might indicate a sense of urgency or like pressure building around wanting to emphasize career and life direction, wanting to get going on whatever it is he wanted to do for himself in his life, for instance. So that sense of being ready to take action or push forward, regardless of the disruption or upheaval. That's kind of starting to get into the mix of Mars and the multitude of qualities it has is, yes, it can help you push forward, but it does have that disruptive quality. There's going to be some chaos, and we're going to have maybe sort of a hot, messy situation that we have to make our way through. Mars could also, of course, activate this sense of wanting to strike out in a new direction. So that idea of, I want to go it alone. Mars is very independent. I want my autonomy. I want my freedom, perhaps. I want to do it my way. These would all be very appropriate with Mars symbolism. So if we now think about this combination of these two progressions, we've got the progressed balsamic moon phase, which is a time of closure and endings and release and letting go. And we've got that progressed Mars on the ascendant, which has got these cutting ties, this increase of independence, wanting to push for what you want. We really get this feel, I hope that's kind of coming through for you all listening, of wanting to break away or cut away or strike off in a new direction, even if we're burning bridges as we do it. That's, Mars is not worried about that at all. This isn't a change we're undergoing under a Venus motif, which might have more of a conciliatory or collaborative quality. This is a change we're undergoing under the motif of Mars. But when we add that progressed Mars, which already has that cutting quality, into the progressed balsamic moon phase, we really are getting this more significant ending or coming apart, if you like. So another way I think about Mars is like a coming apart, where of course Venus is like a coming together energy. So the experience of breaking away from a family business or a family relationship would fit thematically here. And I know Harry lives a very privileged life that is different from the lives that most of us live. But everyday people have these kinds of progressions, and they do want to break away from things they have been involved in. So that's how we can kind of follow the thread into sort of a more regular person's life. And then, a more regular person might have to consider how we're going to manage, financially, or what are we going to do for our activities or what have you. But that need to break away, that's the kind of key here. So that's a lot that we've got just from looking at two progressions. And that would be so juicy to be able to share with a client that might be going through this. It would be so helpful for them to understand what they're feeling and some of the ways they could, express that energy. But I did mention there were two transits that I wanted to bring in as well. And so let's just touch on those quickly. So first up, I'm going to mention kind of the smaller transit, which is Jupiter was in Capricorn at that time. So Jupiter was actually conjunct Harry's ascendant in January of 2020. And that's a once in 12-year transit that, again, we would all go through. And typically we might say more positive things about transiting Jupiter on the ascendant, things about growth or new adventure, or maybe some luck or abundance, maybe new cycles starting. And certainly transiting Jupiter on your ascendant can be an omen to emphasize yourself rather than others, because of course the ascendant is that most individual part of the chart. But this Jupiter has some nuance to it as well. This is Jupiter in Capricorn, which is the fall placement of Jupiter, where Jupiter isn't as abundant or lucky or lush in its support as it might be elsewhere. And it's Jupiter on the ascendant while progressed Mars is on the ascendant. So this Jupiter transit is maybe a little different from what it first initially appears. There's more going on to this transit than just Jupiter on the ascendant. And so instead of maybe just focusing on that, if we bring the progressions in, we get another layer, which is deeper and more rich and adds a really significant piece of the story. That progressed Mars on the ascendant is a unique thing. It would only happen once in a person's life, if it happened at all. And that is why it would be more important to consider than the transit of Jupiter, which will go over the ascendant every 12 years. So you might have 5 or 6 or 7 transits of Jupiter over your ascendant over the course of your life. And they're all going to contribute to your experience, but because they're going to happen with some frequency, they're not going to be as significant or potent or maybe unique as something that's only going to happen once. So that idea of transiting Jupiter on the ascendant, but we've got progressed Mars there. The progressed Mars is going to bring all that heat and a much more disruptive quality in that transit of Jupiter might amplify, for instance. The second transit is probably the more significant one, which is transiting Neptune was around the middle of Pisces at this point, and so it was making a square to Harry's natal Mars in Sagittarius. So natal Mars was at 16 Sag, and there was a period of time, almost 2 years, starting in May of 2018, so going back a little bit, right through until February of 2020, where transiting Neptune was moving through that 16-degree marker of Pisces and making a square to Mars. So Harry was just coming to the end of a transit from Neptune to his natal Mars as we get to this start of 2020. So it's a longer transit, but it is a transit that indicates a period in life where people are low energy. Maybe there's a lethargic quality. There's some confusion or uncertainty about direction or about motivation. We know that transiting Neptune can bring in this kind of messy, overwhelming quality of like, it's not clear, but it doesn't feel good, but I'm not sure what I should do. And that, in many ways, that transit of Neptune to natal Mars is reinforcing or kind of repeating some of the themes that we've already been discussing, particularly to do with that progressed balsamic moon phase. And so we've got that tiredness and that feeling weary. Mars can be the fuel that we get, and Neptune is like putting, a big bucket of water on the fire. And so we've got this sense of, do I have to surrender or let go or give something up? Am I working through disappointments? And these are all things that we can navigate in a big Neptune transit. So if this was a client, I'd really be honoring what they might be expressing as a need for a different kind of life, a life that might feel more meaningful for them. Remembering, of course, that Mars in Harry's chart does rule his midheaven and his career path. And Neptune transits can bring up this craving, this sense of wanting to make a difference. But sometimes we have to navigate this sort of messy period of confusion before we sort of stumble into something that feels like it's going to perhaps have a sense of meaning for us. I'd be talking with the client about, yes, a slower pace seems really relevant. We've got a big Neptune transit, but we've got that progressed balsamic moon phase. And would be talking about who or what they might want to consider stepping away from between progressed Mars on the ascendant and that progressed balsamic moon phase. They may be kind of wanting to conjure up this new path or this new identity for themselves, but we might talk about the need to leave some things from the past behind before we get to the creation of the new space. I'd be talking a little bit about them too, about that progressed moon phase that, you going into this balsamic moon phase, which is about the letting go. It is the time of hibernation. And so we are maybe wanting to put things on pause or get quiet for a while to the extent that we're able with our own life circumstances. But we'd be thinking about when is the freshness of that progressed new moon kicking in. And that would be a time to be really keeping in mind for that planting seeds for the future. And so for Harry, that progressed new moon cycle kicked in July of 2023. And I've had these kinds of conversations with clients where I'd talk about, it's sort of a working behind the scenes piece right now, but we're not, at that energetic level with the progressed moon, we're not fully ready to kind of burst forward or even begin or, initiate until we get into that new moon phase. So for Harry, early 2020 was this kind of messy combination of predictive elements where there's some disruption and tension with progressed Mars on the ascendant. There's definitely that restlessness of wanting to change things or shake things up, but also that confusion and tiredness of the progressed balsamic moon phase and the Neptune transit in the mix there. And it would be really common, and I've seen this with clients from all walks of life, to go through a period of time where they're less productive and less motivated with that kind of combination of timing events. They might feel like they're drifting or they're dabbling or they're just kind of doing what they need to do to get by without trying to, advance themselves or really climb this ladder of success. It's almost like you want to give yourself permission to just go, slower in a way that's relevant for you. So that's kind of a brief look at some of the important timing factors that were influencing Prince Harry in early 2020 that I am quite sure contributed to some of the decisions, the choices, and changes that he and his wife made about their lives and their direction at that point in time. And so I hope this gives you a little taste of how incorporating secondary progressions into your timing work can be super insightful. Some students describe it as kind of getting the inside layer or getting inside the chart, like beneath the transits, so you can get more of a sense of how is that chart kind of, or how is that person unfolding or evolving through time. If you do want to learn more about predicting with progressions, I hope to see you in class this June. Thanks so much for joining me today, everyone. If you have been working with progressions, let me know in the comments below. Maybe you know what your progressed moon phase is, so share your stories below. I look forward to reading those. Until we meet again, everyone, take care. Bye for now.